Welcome to the Danger in Silence. I'm Hannah Longley. I'm the Clinical Director of Advocacy and Crisis Intervention here at NAMI, Maine. And today I am joined by...
I'm Monique Coombs. I'm the Director of Community Programs for the Maine Coastal Fishing Association.
So it's a running joke around the office that, like, I just know everyone. Like, no matter where we go, no matter what's happening, I find people that I know. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but...
It's a Maine thing.
It is a very Maine thing.
Yep.
It absolutely is. And so Monique and I have known each other for...
It's 20, so like 28. Well, if you think about when I was a freshman, that was 96. So 28 years. That's a long time.
It's a really long time.
Uh-huh.
That's very long. So, yeah.
That's also a main thing, I think, though,
Yeah.
to have people in your life that you've known. Like my daughter, she and her best friend have known each other since preschool.
Yeah.
You know, and they're college now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean... So Monique and I went to high school together. See, this is where it gets very Maine, too. Monique and I went to high school together. We were both graduated
from North Yarmouth Academy.
Yes, Mrs. Feldman would be very disappointed with my lack
Right
of
now.
articulation with
Yes.
that. But we both went to North Yarmouth Academy. We were a year apart. My best friend also, since I was 8, so even before we went to NYA, there was only like 2 or 3 girls on the hockey team. And so we kind of bonded, and we were all the other one had. But now at this point, we just know each other's deep, dark secrets, and we have to stay best friends.
Yeah.
But so Mel went with us, and then you have since married in to the Coombs family. Actually, not since. Like, it's been
Almost 20 years.
Doing the math, and I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, so quite some time. I am often confused and have been since high school for one of the Coombs family. So I've stopped correcting it. I just am an
Go with
honorary.
it.
Yeah, I'm just an honorary Coombs.
And what's crazy too is Melody was my guide at NYA in 8th grade. When I went to visit NYA, she was the first person I met, and then who would have known however many years later I'd marry her older brotch, which, yes, I suppose is also a very main thing for, yeah.
Yeah, we're all just
Yep.
connected and all of that, which serves us well. So in my work here at NAMI, I'm going to assume everyone who listens to this knows that we do a lot of mental health work here. And one of the focuses is really looking at high-risk male populations that are the highest risk for a lot of different mental health challenges, including suicide deaths. And then you started in your job at the Maine Coastal Fishing Association, and we just... I was going to say reconnect, but again, we've always...
Yeah. So I've been with MCFA for 8 or 9 years at this point, and our mission is to restore the fisheries in the Gulf of Maine and sustain Maine's fishing communities for future generations. And my job really encompasses the latter half of that program, so working directly with the fishermen on community issues like the working waterfront. We've wanted to start a fisherman wellness program for many years, but as I'm sure you guys know here, like funding for mental health, especially for a male population, is not the easiest thing in the entire world. So it took us a little while to get it going. And silver lining to the pandemic, there was a lot of rapid response funding, and we were able to work with a small foundation to get a little bit of funding to start to just build the program. And I think I reached out to you. I reached out to Health Affiliates of Maine, Access Health, to try to find a list of counselors that were available to work with commercial fishermen. And MCFA was able to pay their bills for them, just to break down the barriers to getting into therapy for fishermen that were willing to talk or wanted to talk with someone. And we still have that program available, but I think it's some of the other work that we've done with outreach and advocacy for more mental health resources for commercial fishermen that have been incredibly helpful, as well as the mental health first aid training that you guys have done for us. And we've been able to offer that to like the Department of Marine Resources, which has been fantastic, and our staff, although I think I'm due to recertify here in a few months. I'm getting close. So, but programs like that have been just incredible for developing the program, reaching out to fishermen, letting them know that they're not alone, that there are resources available, talking with clinicians and therapists and others about commercial fishing. It's just been really great.
Yeah, and that's, when you bring all of that around is part of what the concern was initially too, was that cultural competency is really understanding the fishing community. I mean, when you grow up in honorary Coombs, but then also in that area you get it, but you also get the barriers, the culture, the there's a lot of assumptions that can be made about what the stressors are, or what the barriers are, and what they may be struggling with. And you were able to take that and do some cultural competency trainings. And we've done that with other populations, with clinicians also, that are high risk. So you were able to get pretty creative in making sure that a lot of the stigma, so like the front end, the stigma, really tackle that stigma that is associated with mental health, but then also making sure that they're going into supportive services. One of the biggest things that I always say is that therapy is like any other relationship, and sometimes you connect with people and sometimes you don't. And so how do we pave the way to make it more likely that you'll connect with them?
Yeah, absolutely. And that part's actually, the cultural competency has been super rewarding for me. So I'm not sure we've noted yet that my husband, Melody's older brother, your best friend, is a commercial fisherman. And so I have, I'm in a unique and wonderful and sometimes very stressful position of being able to work for the fishing industry, but also to be a part of the industry, a part of a fishing community and a fishing family. And so with the cultural competency, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Is that how it goes?
I think so. Yeah.
You got the point right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of assumptions that are made about commercial fishing and what the stressors are, for better or for worse. And so with those trainings that I've done, I really talk about some of the stress that's in the commercial fishing industry that's sort of misunderstood. What it takes to become a fisherman, the costs of licenses and permits, the cost of doing business, the variability, the uncertainty, some of the stuff that, people read about in the news, trying to break that down for them in a way that's digestible so that if a fisherman does choose to work with a therapist, that the therapist has a general understanding of some of the issues. And so it's not, getting peppered with questions about the industry in that way, so that they can feel like they're somewhat understood before they get into that room. And then even going over some of the common vernacular that's in commercial fishing that, if a fisherman's talking about his day and he said, I was thinking about it while I was steaming home, understanding that steaming home is, when the boat's in gear and just headed towards home. So that's been super helpful. And, it also makes us feel confident when we're able to tell a fisherman that is interested in working with a therapist that, this therapist does have some general understanding. I think that really helps commercial fishermen. Right now, one of the largest stressors is that there's a lot of feelings of vilification in the industry, that they're the reason that there's issues on the ocean, whether it's regarding climate change or North Atlantic right whales. The media is not always super nice about that. And so they have a lot of, I don't want to say resentment, but, emotions, feelings, stress, anger, anxiety. And so being able to work with a therapist or a group of therapists to help them understand and be more competent in those topics, so a commercial fisherman doesn't feel like they would potentially get vilified in that room. It seems like somewhat of a small thing, but I think it makes a huge, huge difference.
Absolutely. I love that you finished saying that right as I took a sip of my coffee. So
It's my turn now.
So sorry about that. And I think that as society, there are really, I don't know how to say it, but like really great campaigns to raise awareness for certain populations. We know the agricultural community is another incredibly high-risk population that has received attention, funding, and support. It still remains a high-risk population. one of the things that I think is unique about the Fisherman is the fact that they do have such a strong advocate in you, and being able to say like, "Hey, this is a big deal. How do we break through that stigma? How do we discuss the fact that this is hard work, that it is dangerous work?" People think about fishing, they're like, "Oh, you go out on a Sunday afternoon and it's so nice, and make sure you bring your sunscreen." But this is hard, scary, dangerous work.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. So when I start the cultural competencies, sometimes I ask everybody to close their eyes and picture what commercial fishing looks like to them, because there does seem to, it runs the gauntlet from like a little old man in a skiff with like a Southwest hat and a pipe in his mouth, and it's a beautiful sunny day, to like these massive factory trawlers where people are like sweeping up everything in their way in these nets. And neither of those things are true in Maine. Especially with the lobster industry. Each vessel is a small business. It's owner-operator. So the guy behind the boat, or gal behind the boat, behind the wheel of the boat, owns the permit, the boat, and all the gear. And so, that's one thing. And then one of the questions I get sometimes when I tell people my husband's a fisherman is like, well, what does he do in the winter? I'm like, well, he still goes fishing. Some people are able to take the winters off, but like, whether it's raining or snowing doesn't matter. It's the wind that commercial fishermen have to pay attention to. So even if we're cold and it's snowing on land and we're like, there can't be any guys fishing out there, well, there potentially could be. Commercial fishing in the United States is one of the most dangerous civilian occupations. There's a high risk of injury, whether it's breaking a finger or getting a finger stuck in something, or fall overboard. And these can be very traumatic experiences. So, I mean, even considering like the compounding effects of that type of trauma for commercial fishermen, most of them know somebody that's fallen overboard or fallen overboard themselves. A lot of them know a fisherman that's been lost at sea. It's a lot on its own to even just be able to manage those types of things. Commercial fishermen are considered industrial athletes, so it does require a certain amount of physical elements in order to be able to do their jobs. Gear is very heavy, nets are very heavy, there's ropes, their vessel could be pitching and rolling depending on the weather, so there's an element of balance. So even on its own, just with those things, like you would think that there would be way more resources available for these people to tap into. But one of the issues, and Hannah, we've written about this before, is the United States Department of Agriculture. They regulate agriculture, but they also advocate for farmers. And so they have a lot of suicide prevention. They have a lot of mental health advocacy. The commercial fishing industry is the marine resources are managed by the National Marine Fisheries Services, which is a part of NOAA, but there is no advocacy body within that department that's advocating for fishermen as human beings or even their businesses. Their businesses are under the SBA. So, that makes it really hard for
SBA, so
Small Business Administration. Thank you for asking me to clarify my acronyms. So, it's really important for industry groups like the Maine Coastal Fishing Association to advocate for fishermen simply as human beings, because very often, even when we're reading the paper, you hear about the vessels, you hear about the marine resource, you hear about the management, but we've gotten a little bit better, but in the past, we've not done a great job of clarifying the impacts of many of these resources and policies on fishing communities and on fishing families. And that's pretty scary in Maine, especially because our coastal communities, a lot of them, their economics are the Maine lobster industry, full stop. And so if we have anything that impacts the lobster industry, which has happened quite a bit, especially in the last decade with new rules, new gear, lawsuits, I mean, that really affects a lot of our coastal communities, not just the fishing families, but the other small businesses that are in the community and potentially hospitality in the future. I mean, people love Maine lobster. They love to see the boats. They love the colorful buoys. And so, the health and well-being of commercial fishermen and their industry is really something all Mainers should be sort of paying attention to and advocating for.
And I think that that's where a lot of what gets lost, just like very Maine, everyone's connected to everyone else somehow, is the fact that people overlook the fact that all of our businesses, all of our economy, all of our cultures are also interconnected, and we're dependent on each other. And it gets to be a catch-22. And I say this, knowing all of the battles you guys are facing, but then also just small social shifts that people don't necessarily stop to reflect at, as everyone wants. We had an influx during the pandemic of folks from out of state who wanted to move in, which is great. Welcome to our state. It's gorgeous. We love it. But that took up a lot of the waterfront property. And so I just know we were reflecting, I live about an hour away from you guys now, which makes me sad. With that influx in there, we're seeing more and more lobstermen who are moving out towards me. And when you have to be on that boat at the before dawn,
before the crack of dawn,
really early, and it's cold and it's not fun. But, adding that commute to it, and adding that commute with the gear and the storage of gear and all of that, like, people don't really stop and reflect on the impact of the stress that has on lobstermen. And so again, we're all connected. And as things shift, it really starts to have some significant impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually been writing quite a bit about gentrification in coastal Maine and how that is impacting commercial fishermen. We did have, as you said, like an influx of people during COVID. Harpswell, other coastal communities have in the past been, very higher populations in the summertime and quiet in the wintertime. And what we saw was a lot of people take advantage of their summer residence and become permanent residents, or, people that have potentially never been to the coast of Maine that were just seeking solace and, lower taxes than where they live, or, the price of homes was lower than where they live, although it's high for us here in Maine. And so we've seen a significant price increase in home values on the coast of Maine, which is making it harder for fishing families to stay or for their kids to be able to buy homes, which is really sad. And then there's also an increase in development because of that. So if you bought a shack on the waterfront that's sight unseen and you just want it to be your year-round home and you develop it. So there's also something called solastalgia, which is the feeling of homesickness when you're already at home. And so it's when you kind of look around your coastal community. It was actually coined by I can't remember if he was like a philosopher or a scientist. I'm sorry, but to describe the feelings that people had after major climate change impacts like Hurricane Katrina. And so I think fishermen are feeling a lot of that right now when they're looking around their coastal communities and they don't know as many people, or there's a lot more McMansions, if you will. The affordability's gotten more difficult. And as you said, the further away from the coast they have to live, the higher their cost of doing business becomes. And also just like how it makes their job much more difficult. So if they have lobster traps, because they don't fish for lobster in the wintertime, you have to take your traps out of the water. So if you're traveling back and forth from a coastal community because you got to get 800 traps home or find some place to store them, that's expensive. Not to mention the fact that if you're inland, maybe people aren't as familiar with having traps in the dooryard, and so maybe they don't like it, and then there's like some contention with your neighbor. And so it's the cumulative impact of these things that are really starting to build up. And then increasing that is also with the storms we just had, we lost a significant amount of our working waterfront. It's either damaged or completely gone. The wharf in front of our house is gone. I'm sure you've jumped off of it before in high school. And, that's heartbreaking. It's just gone. I don't think it'll get rebuilt. And I think that there's quite a few families that lost wharves that were on their property that have just, a couple of generations ago built it. They just used it to store their traps or maybe access the water, and rebuilding that is not an insignificant cost, not to mention the fact that we do have issues with workforce in this state, like in a lot of places. So finding people to do the work, finding the goods, getting the permits, like it's cumbersome. So, it's a lengthy list of things that are stressing out commercial fishermen right now, but they are the most determined, stubborn, for better or for worse, gritty problem solvers that have been persevering, through all of this for decades. And so I'm still incredibly hopeful and optimistic for the fishing industries in the state of Maine, but it definitely does require support from places like NAMI and advocacy from like MCFA to be able to get us there, because there's a lot of guys, I think, that are struggling.
Absolutely. And that's one of the big things, you know, when we think about our survival instincts, we have fight, flight, freeze. But there's also fun. There's that connection. There's that need to connect. And that is, you know, from I worked in a restaurant that was right next to one of the larger wharfs all through high school, and you know, everyone would go out together, and then they'd all come in, and then they'd end up, and we all knew each other, and there was just such camaraderie and support. And as the community spreads out and they lose those gathering places, definitely that. But it's still, again, they're a force to be reckoned with. Stubborn, I think, is one way to put it, but in a good way.
Yeah,
like,
stubborn in a good way.
Yeah.
Determined,
yes.
And they love being fishermen. They love fishing. They love being out on the ocean, the independence of being their own boss, the ability to pass something down to the next generation, which is, you know, would be one, a job if a young kid wants to go fishing, but also, you know, a healthy Gulf of Maine. And, you know, they protect the stocks, like the lobster industry, the groundfish industry. You know, they try to participate in policy and advocacy. I mean, it is just one thing after another, and they keep sticking with it. And there's a reason for that, you know?
And I think that that's one of the misconceptions or the stereotypes for me, just knowing the community, is that they really do feel that they are the guardians of the sea.
Yes.
And I think that that's not necessarily conveyed all the time, but they really feel a sense of ownership and responsibility in protecting their home for generations, and their, you know, all of that. I will add, you mentioned it, and then we kind of skimmed over it. Monique's daughter, she's amazing. She's so fantastic. I can't believe she's 18.
19. She just turned 19 last week.
Last week, because Super Bowl weekend.
Yep.
19. Oh my gosh,
I know.
That just
keep
hit
going
me a little
Hannah,
bit. But she graduated from high school last year. Has her own boat.
She has her own boat. She's got her commercial fishing license. She participated in the tech program, so she graduated with her welding certification, because we did, you know, she wants to go fishing, but we did encourage her to find another trade or skill set to be able to diversify how she is able to make an income, which I think a lot of fishing families are pushing their kids towards. We all have concerns about the future. So
it's also a practical skill to have on a boat
100%.
And in that community, when that's a need that comes up frequently.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of why she chose that. But she is going to school right now. She's doing business administration, and she likes accounting, which is bizarre to me, but you mean to each their own. So she's really doing great. I don't know if my son has the same interest. And so it's been, you know, a learning curve for my husband and I to have one kid that's like super into it and one that's like not quite sure, because the way the lobster industry works, if he doesn't get his apprenticeship hours in now, it could potentially hinder his ability to get a license in the future. So there's sort of a like, you got to do it just in case, which I'm not sure is the best way to manage an industry, or maybe even to encourage your kid, but we're just doing the best we can with what we have, and we want him to have as many opportunities as he can. So we'll see how it goes.
I was going to say that's one of the, no other profession. I mean, Riley, her youngest, and my oldest are right around the same age. I mean, they're 14.
Mm-hmm.
No other industries, like at 14, you got to make your decision now.
You got to figure it out.
Make or break it.
Yeah.
Like, and, you know, and just to be able to have that just in case.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're being proactive with it, and you're being proactive. You know, I want to kind of step back because I know that we're running out of time. I saw Devin checking things. We have a time limit on these. And you were worried we weren't going to be able to fill it up.
I was not worried. It's just worried about the quality of the content.
It's fine. It's fine. For those who aren't aware, NAMI has invested in a license for mantherapy.org, which is an evidence-based suicide prevention for high-risk males. And so it has a lot of different targeted campaigns, discussions. It has a lot of humor in it. I personally enjoy it, but it has a lot of really great subpopulations in there. Also, we have there's first responders, there's military, there is construction. So there's some targeted. The agriculture industry. So they had targeted campaigns for different industries, and it's fantastic. They have a head inspection. They talk about the fact that you take your car in for your car inspection, so take your head inspection. I actually had one first responder who called me and was like, so I keep taking the Man Therapy head inspection. I was like, okay, great. I'm glad that you're using it. And he was like, well, it says that I haven't crossed the threshold of like needing any sort of services and support, but I'm taking it like every other day to make sure that when I do cross it,
I'm aware,
and then I can seek help. So I thought maybe I just seek help now, and I was like, that's awesome. Yeah. That's fantastic, and that's exactly what it is. It has a meditation video to frying bacon, which I think is hilarious. It talks about like pooping and all sorts of fun stuff. But I kind of give that as a preface for the fact that when we got the license, we reached out to a lot of our community partners, you being one of them, the fishing community being one of them. And you noted that all of the fishing was pleasure fishing or leisurely fishing. What are they? Or recreational.
Yeah.
Don't know why I couldn't think of that word.
Right.
I really, yeah. It's a Monday morning, so just sorry about
It's Tuesday,
that.
but that's also
It's
okay.
Tuesday, but they're not going to know. It's like a Tuesday, Monday because we had a holiday yesterday. But you noted that there was no commercial fishing, and because we had that license, we were able to pull you in and be like, hey, let's push you over there. And you guys ended up doing some really cool work that apparently won an award. So will you talk about that?
Yeah. So, you guys also introduced us to Man Therapy at a really hard time for us. It was January 2020, I believe. I can't believe it's been that long. We had just lost our board president and friend, Joe Nickerson. He was the captain of the fishing vessel Haley Ann that sank in January, and he and his crew perished at sea. And NAMI was wonderful to our staff and the fishermen that we worked with. We were able to offer grief support, and really it was Greg and you were telling us about Man Therapy. And, it wasn't like the right away thought, but as we talked more, it was like, oh, we do need this for commercial fishing. I mean, 5 years ago, if you Googled mental health and fishing, that's what came up was like, go fly fishing, go trout fishing. There was nothing on Google about mental health for commercial fishermen. I'm incredibly proud now that you can Google commercial fishing and mental health and actually get articles and data and statistics, not a lot, but a little, about mental health and commercial fishing. Rome wasn't built in a day.
That's right. We have we at least get the waterway going.
Surely we're getting there. And Man Therapy was awesome to work with. They took all of our feedback, and they created these cool campaigns that were based on old vintage like seafood tins. And we worked with them to really kind of loop in the vernacular that fishermen use. So when there's a beautiful day outside, a fisherman will say it's flat ass calm. And so it says stuff like, get that mind of yours running on the flat ass calm. There's, like you said, there's some stuff that's kind of punny and cute. Like a big hit was give your brain as much attention as you give your dinghy. And we were very excited too, because we worked with an organization called Northeast Center to help with some of the funding and building out the campaign. And they were really open to some of the like catchy, clever puns. And I think it really does resonate with commercial fishermen. And again, it's just nice to have that type of advocacy and outreach to get the conversation going in the social narrative more generally, and then in the commercial fishing industry specifically, for fishermen to know that they're not alone. Like you said, they're all connected. It's a big community. They're all having very similar thoughts and feelings, and I think, Hannah, like we've talked about in the past, like our next goal is the peer-to-peer support and helping them, with talking with each other and really continuing to elevate the conversation around mental health and well-being in the industry. Because it's incredibly important right now.
Yeah. And it just keeps growing.
It just keeps growing.
It's one of those things where, again, you sit around and you listen to them like laughing, like, oh, I went in and my waiter's all filled up and I started like going down, like, haha, this is a normal thing. No.
Yeah.
No.
It's scary and it's how
really
they
scary.
cope.
You can laugh about it, but let's talk about the fact that like your brain and your body reacted a certain way and like normalize the fact that it's okay.
Yeah. They're very action oriented people too, which is a whole other conversation around moral injury that we can talk about later. But I've talked to many of fishermen that have fallen overboard, and they all talk about how they have to get back on the boat immediately and just keep working. And so very often for them, the trauma or the stress doesn't surface until a couple of months down the road, or, and like with most people too, when you're not really thinking about your stress and then all of a sudden you see a Hallmark commercial and you start crying and you're like, what the hell's wrong with me? Like sometimes it's something that happened weeks before. And I've spoken, like I said, to quite a few fishermen where that was the case. It sort of surfaces later. So even helping to make that connection for people is very helpful.
And to normalize, our brain and our body is in survival mode. We have to get to a certain point and then be like, oh, okay, I'm safe now. Oh, God, that was bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being able to recognize all of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we might be close to time. Okay. So as all of our loyal listeners, because I'm sure we have so many of them know, and I prepared you for, is that we end every episode with a fun fact. And you said that you have one that I will be surprised about. And then you're like, I don't know if you will, because we've known each other for so long.
It's also just kind of boring, maybe. I don't know, but it's also fun. So I am a Mainer mostly.
She was born in Massachusetts.
I was not born in Massachusetts.
You came from Massachusetts.
I came from Belgium, which is what makes this fact a little bit funner now.
Didn't you live in like Lawrence, Massachusetts?
No, I didn't live in Massachusetts. I have never lived in Massachusetts. So I was born in Belgium. Fun fact, born in Belgium. My dad was military, so I grew up overseas. But both my parents were born in Maine. Technically, your parents have to be born in Maine, and you have to be born in Maine to be from Maine. But I was born in Belgium, and I it's not my fault. My dad was working for our country when I was born, so I just, I feel like I can call myself a Mainer.
Why did I think you came from Massachusetts?
Belgium and Boston both start with a B.
Maybe. I really thought you came from Massachusetts prior to coming to... Were you...
Dude, so my freshman year at NYA, I got the first and only student of the month. They tried this one time, and I got it, and then they never did it again. So it's either an honor or embarrassing.
Well, maybe they're like, well, maybe this wasn't.
Let's see. It makes her feel more welcome. Yeah. So I was born in Belgium, grew up overseas, and then came back to Maine to go to high school.
Huh.
Yeah.
I legit thought I knew you were born in Belgium. Fun fact. This was. I knew you were born in Belgium, but I legit thought you were in Massachusetts right before coming back to Maine.
Nope.
Huh.
Fun fact.
That is a fun fact.
Thanks. That's it.
I had my fun fact, but now I'm so distracted by yours. I have to do one too, but I'm so distracted by yours.
Where were you born?
I was born in Maine.
Okay. Brunswick?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, you were born in that area. You were born in either Brunswick or Bath back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Those were the two maternity. Yeah, no, my family's been here for a while. Uh-huh. My family's been here. See, this can be my fun fact. My family's been living in the Bath Brunswick area for so long, and my husband's family's been living in Bath Brunswick for so long that when we started dating, he was very thankful that my grandmother was really big into genealogy. And so we could very definitively say our family lines had never...
Yeah, didn't have to double check.
Did not. But yeah,
It's another main thing.
that is definitely a main
it's a main
thing.
thing.
Yeah. Can that be my fun?
Sure, it's a fun fact.
That's a fun fact. Yeah, I was generations back. We've been here. My husband's family's been here. Yeah.
Can I just make one plug, and you guys can cut it if you need to?
But absolutely.
Since we have podcast listeners here too, one of the things that MCFA worked on with Northeast Center, I think actually it was prior to doing the Man Therapy campaign, was something called the Fishing Forward podcast. I think there's 12 episodes, and they're all about health and wellness in the commercial fishing industry. But if you're interested in health and wellness generally, they're also very interesting podcasts. My favorite one, I think, is episode 11, which is about stress, anxiety, and moral injury. But there's also episodes about hydration, caffeine, rest, relationships, workforce. So maybe your listeners would like it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely make a plug for that.
Okay.
Moral injury, that's one that we should revisit, and maybe we'll revisit again, is that it's something that I see and work with individuals in the fishing community, in the first responder community, in the military community.
Medical, it's everywhere
Medical,
now.
Everywhere. And so that's maybe tune back in for part two of Monique. We have reoccurring guests. Is that what we call a recurring? Is a recurring guest, a reoccurring?
I would love to recur.
Reoccurring character. Yeah.
Reoccur. Yeah. I'd love to recur.
Yeah.
I'd love to come back.
So stay tuned for part 2 at some point when we get our schedules to collide, which is literally what it is.
Thank you. And I'll also just add to our slogan at Maine Coastal Fishermen Association is "Together we persevere," and I really think it's stuff like this and conversations like this and the work that we've done that sort of highlight that. So together we persevere, and thank you guys so much.
Beautiful. Thank you for being here and joining us.